Let me call 911 and the police. Don't!
No police.
The rain came down hard enough to blur the neon sign above Sal's diner into a bleeding smear of red and blue. It turned the alley pavement into slick black glass and washed the smell of fryer grease into something almost metallic. Amara Vance pushed through the back door with a trash bag slung over her shoulder, her white collar already damp from a 12-hour double shift. Her hands smelled like coffee grounds and sanitizer. Her feet throbbed in her cheap black shoes, the kind you buy when tuition payments come before comfort. 6 months ago, she had been memorizing anatomy charts. Tonight, she was calculating tip totals in her head and wondering if she could stretch canned soup for another 2 days. She heaved the trash bag toward the dumpster, and that's when she saw it. White silk. Too clean for this alley, too expensive. And soaked through with blood. At first, she thought it was a mannequin dumped from some boutique robbery. Then it moved. The man slumped against the brick wall lifted his head slowly, rain tracing the sharp lines of his face. Even pale and bleeding, he looked deliberate, controlled. His dark hair was slicked back, jaw tight, eyes alert despite the wound spreading across his chest. A gun rested inches from his hand. Amara froze. Every logical thought arrived at once. Call 911. Walk away. This isn't your problem. Then he reached for her wrist. Don't, he said, not loud, not desperate, just certain. No police. His voice wasn't pleading. It was commanding. Her pulse roared in her ears. Up close, she could see the damage. The blood wasn't from a shallow cut. It was deep, dangerous, lethal if untreated. Her training slid into place automatically. Assess airway, check breathing, locate entry wound. She hadn't worn scrubs in 6 months. But her hands remembered. Rain dripped from her bun as she pressed her palm against his chest to slow the bleeding. His white shirt was expensive, fine cotton, tailored. Not something a street thug would wear. When her fingers slipped beneath the torn fabric, she felt muscle, heat, and ink. Dark, intricate tattoos crawled from his collarbone up his neck. Not random art. Symbolic. Intentional. Not a petty criminal. Something higher. He watched her carefully as she worked, even through the pain. Not frightened. Measuring her. You're going to die out here, she muttered. Not if you don't let me. The rain intensified, pounding against the alley walls. And Amara Vance made the worst decision of her life. She dragged him into her apartment. Morning came slowly, filtered through rain-streaked glass and the thin blue light of a city that never fully slept. Seo-Jun surfaced from the dark in fragments, pain first, sharp and controlled, then the faint scent of antiseptic and something softer beneath it. Onion, garlic, broth. He opened his eyes. The ceiling above him was cracked in one corner. The couch beneath him sagged slightly in the middle. A small lamp glowed on a side table that had clearly seen better years. Nothing about the room matched the silk shirt he remembered wearing or the black car he had been thrown from hours earlier. He didn't move at first. He assessed. Breathing steady, shoulder tightly bandaged, stitches clean, not amateur work. On the coffee table, his pistol lay within reach, unloaded, magazine placed neatly beside it. Whoever had brought him here was cautious, intelligent. Beside the gun sat a chipped ceramic bowl filled with steaming soup. He turned his head carefully and found her standing near the kitchenette, back to him, sleeves rolled up. The white collar of her diner uniform had been replaced with an oversized gray sweatshirt. Her hair was still pulled into that precise low bun, though a few strands had escaped overnight. She was stirring something at the stove, like this was just another morning. Like he wasn't bleeding on her couch. "You're awake," she said without turning around. No surprise in her voice, no fear. Just awareness. "How long?" His voice was rough but controlled. 12 hours, she replied. "You lost a lot of blood, I kept you hydrated." He studied her profile as she finally glanced over her shoulder. Her eyes were alert despite what had to be exhaustion. No trembling hands, No frantic movement. She walked over and set the bowl down in front of him. You shouldn't sit up too fast. The apartment was small, one main room, barely enough space between couch and table. A narrow hallway leading to what he assumed was a bedroom, the kind of place people passed through, not stayed in. Poor, but spotless. He let his gaze drift around again. No expensive art, no designer anything, just textbooks stacked carefully under the edge of the coffee table, medical textbooks. He noticed the way her eyes flicked to them and back. Interesting. You're not just a waitress, he said quietly. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she adjusted the bandage at his shoulder with deliberate, professional precision. You shouldn't be asking questions, she said. You're lucky I found you. Lucky? He almost smiled. You stitched me cleanly, he observed. Minimal scarring if it heals properly. You knew where to cut. Her jaw tightened slightly. I know enough. Not trained, but educated. Disgraced doctor, perhaps. Someone hiding from something. No one with that skill ended up serving coffee unless there had been a fall. He leaned back carefully, studying her with renewed interest. You didn't call the police. No, she said. Why? She met his eyes then, steady and unflinching. Because I'm not supposed to be practicing medicine. Silence settled between them, thick but not uncomfortable. Seo-Jun looked at the soup, then at the gun, then at her. A waitress with surgeon's hands. In a city at war. He had been expecting betrayal. Instead, he found a mystery. The knock came hard enough to rattle the thin wood of the door. Amara froze. Seo-Jun didn't. His hand moved instinctively toward the coffee table, toward the gun she had unloaded. He stopped himself just short of touching it, eyes flicking toward her instead. The knock came again, sharper this time. Amara, I know you're in there. Kiki. Of course it was Kiki. Amara closed her eyes for half a second, then moved fast. She crossed the room and grabbed Seo-Jun by the wrist before he could protest. Up, she whispered. Bathroom now. He was still weak, but pride made him stand on his own. She guided him down the narrow hallway, every step careful so he wouldn't reopen the stitches. The apartment suddenly felt even smaller, air thinner, walls closer. Lock it, she said, pushing him inside the bathroom. And don't make a sound. His dark gaze held hers for a fraction longer than necessary, assessing, calculating whether to trust her again. Then he stepped back. She shut the door just as the knocking turned into pounding. Amara smoothed her sweatshirt, ran a hand over her bun, and forced her breathing to slow before unlocking the front door. Kiki Rhodes pushed inside without waiting. She was wrapped in a bright yellow raincoat, curls frizzed from humidity, eyes sharp as ever. Girl, Kiki started, hands on hips, why do you have men's shoes outside your door? Amara blinked. What? Kiki pointed dramatically at the hallway. Big, expensive-looking men's shoes, not the kind you find at Target. Amara's stomach dropped. She'd forgotten them. They're not, I mean. Kiki's eyes narrowed, suspicion mixing with excitement. You better not have some secret boyfriend in here. Amara forced a laugh. Kiki, please, when would I have time for that? Kiki moved further inside, scanning the apartment like a detective. Her gaze drifted to the coffee table, the soup bowl, the folded bandages in the trash can. Then she looked at Amara again. You're sweating. It's hot in here. It's October. Amara crossed her arms to stop herself from glancing toward the hallway. Kiki sighed dramatically and flopped onto the arm of the couch. Have you seen the news this morning? Amara's pulse spiked. No. They're talking about some Korean mob war, like real gangland stuff. Shootings, corporate takeovers, crazy billionaire drama. Kiki leaned closer. They said a high-profile heir got hit last night. Nobody knows if he's alive. The bathroom door felt suddenly paper-thin. Amara swallowed. Why are you telling me this? Because, Kiki said slowly, It happened 3 blocks from here. Silence settled heavy between them. Kiki studied her face more carefully now, not teasing anymore, concerned. Amara, she said quietly, if you are mixed up in something, I need you to tell me. You are not a nurse anymore. You get caught playing doctor for the wrong person and it's over. Amara's eyes flicked toward the hallway despite herself. Kiki noticed. The shift in her expression was immediate. You didn't. Amara didn't answer. From behind the bathroom door, there wasn't a sound. But the entire apartment felt like it was holding its breath. The bell above the diner door chimed, just as Amara balanced 2 plates along her forearm. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. Officer Dante Williams carried his presence the way some men carried cologne, familiar, warm, impossible to ignore. The navy uniform fit him like it had been tailored. His badge caught the afternoon light as he slid into the booth near the window. Amara set the plates down at another table before walking over, forcing her expression into something easy. Afternoon, officer, she said lightly. The usual. Dante smiled, the kind of smile that had once convinced her he was the safest place in the world. Only if it comes with a lecture about cholesterol. She snorted despite herself. You don't listen anyway. He leaned back, studying her more closely than usual. You look tired. Double shifts, she replied quickly. Rent doesn't pay itself. His gaze softened. You don't have to do this forever, you know. You could go back, finish what you started. The words pressed against a bruise she tried not to touch. I'm fine, she said a little too fast. Dante nodded slowly, but his eyes didn't leave her face. We had a shooting last night, he said casually, 3 blocks from here. Her pulse skipped, but she kept her posture steady. Yeah, she asked, reaching for her order pad even though she knew what he'd order. Victim didn't stick around, male, mid-30s, clean exit wound. Whoever treated him knew what they were doing. Dante's gaze sharpened. Stitches were tight, professional. Her throat went dry. Sounds like he got lucky, she managed. Dante's jaw flexed slightly. Or someone made him lucky. He reached across the table and tugged lightly at the edge of her apron. Hold still. Her heart slammed against her ribs. His fingers brushed the side of her sneaker, just near the laces. A dark, rust-colored smear stained the white rubber. He looked up at her. That's not grease. She forced a laugh, the sound brittle around the edges. Relax, it's ketchup. Sal, been experimenting with some new sauce. It stains like crazy. Dante held her gaze for a second longer than necessary, searching, weighing. You sure? I'm sure, she said evenly. He leaned back, but he didn't look convinced. We're hunting someone important, he continued. Not some street kid. This guy has ties to something bigger, organized, dangerous. Her palms felt damp. And if you find him, she asked carefully. Dante's expression hardened in a way she rarely saw. Then I do my job. A silence settled between them, thick and unspoken. He reached for her hand then, gently, thumb brushing over her knuckles. You, tell me if something was wrong, wouldn't you? Amara met his eyes and saw only sincerity there. No suspicion, no accusation. Just concern. She thought of the man bleeding on her couch, of the gun on her table, of the stitches that would leave a scar only she knew how to trace. I'm fine, Dante, she said softly. He searched her face one last time before nodding. But as he released her hand, his gaze drifted once more to her sneaker. And this time, he didn't smile. That night, the rain returned. Not as violent as before, just steady, persistent, a soft drumming against the window that filled the quiet spaces between them. Seo-Jun sat propped against the arm of the couch, his bandaged shoulder resting carefully against a pillow. The lamp cast warm light across his exposed collarbone, catching the edge of ink beneath the gauze. He looked less like a crime lord tonight, and more like a man who had lost a fight he wasn't used to losing. Amara sat cross-legged on the floor near the coffee table, an anatomy textbook open in front of her, highlighter uncapped. pen tapping absently against her lip as she reread the same paragraph for the third time. She didn't notice he was watching her. Not the way her brow furrowed when she concentrated. Not the way her fingers traced diagrams as if committing them back to memory. Not the quiet intensity that replaced the diner girl ease. "You read like you're studying for an exam," he said. She startled slightly but didn't look up. Old habit. For what? Nothing. He didn't accept that. You don't memorize textbooks for nothing. Silence stretched between them, thin but not hostile. She turned a page slowly. "I used to be in school." "Used to," he repeated. "Life happens." His gaze drifted to the stack of other books tucked under the table. Pathophysiology, clinical assessment, pharmacology. This wasn't casual reading. "You left," he said, not a question. She closed the book. "Why do you care?" He held her eyes evenly. "Because you don't belong in that diner." The words landed harder than she expected. "You don't know where I belong. I know competence when I see it." Her laugh was soft, but there was no humor in it. "You assume a lot." "It's how I survive." She stood, restless now, and crossed to the kitchenette, rinsing out a mug that didn't need rinsing. "You think because someone has skill, they deserve something better?" she asked quietly. "Yes. That's not how it works." He watched her shoulders tense slightly. "Then how does it work?" "You do everything right," she said, not turning around. "You work, you study, you sacrifice, and sometimes it still isn't enough." The rain filled the pause. Seo-Jun shifted carefully, ignoring the pull of stitches. Failure doesn't erase ability. Her hands stilled in the sink. "It feels like it does." He studied her profile, the controlled calm she wore like armor. "You stitched me with precision," he said. "You stabilized blood loss without hesitation. That's not someone who failed." She finally turned, leaning against the counter. "You talk like everything is simple." "It is," he said quietly. "You either rise or you don't." She held his gaze. "And what if rising costs you something you can't afford to lose?" For a moment, something flickered behind his composure. Recognition. Loneliness. He looked toward the window, toward the city lights bleeding through rain. "Then you learn to live with it." The room felt smaller somehow. She walked back and sat on the edge of the couch, closer than before. "For someone who commands rooms," she said softly, "you sound very alone." His eyes shifted back to hers. "So do you." And for the first time since he'd woken in her apartment, neither of them looked away. The knock didn't come this time. It was quieter than that. A shift in the air, a shadow passing the narrow strip of light beneath the door. Amara felt it before she understood it. Seo-Jun did not look toward the entrance immediately. He was already watching her, as if measuring whether she would panic. There was a soft click from the hallway outside. Not the sound of a key, not a forced entry, something more deliberate. The door opened. Amara's breath left her in a single sharp inhale. The man who stepped inside moved with unsettling calm. Tall, impeccably dressed in dark clothes that absorbed the room's light. His face was expressionless, almost serene, but his eyes scanned every corner in seconds: couch, window, kitchen, Amara. Then they settled on Seo-Jun. Amara's pulse roared in her ears. She took one instinctive step backward, positioning herself between the stranger and the couch. If this was who she thought it was, this was how she died. The man's gaze flicked to her briefly, evaluating, not unkind, not warm either. Then he did something she hadn't expected. He bowed. Not deeply, but respectfully. "Hyung-nim," he said quietly. Seo-Jun didn't look surprised. "Taemin," he replied, voice level. The room seemed to tilt. Amara looked from one man to the other. "You know him?" she asked, her voice tight. Seo-Jun's expression didn't change. "Yes." Taemin straightened slowly. "You were not responding," he said to Seo-Jun. "We traced the last confirmed location." "Wait." Amara's stomach dropped. "How many of you are outside?" she demanded. Timon's eyes returned to her, calm, controlled. "Only me." She didn't believe him. Seo-Jun shifted carefully, wincing almost imperceptibly. "Director Choi," he asked. "Still searching," Timon replied. "Your disappearance has destabilized negotiations." Amara's head spun. Negotiations. Destabilized. She looked at Seo-Jun, and the quiet man who had shared soup in her kitchen seemed to harden into something else, something sharper, colder. "You tracked him here," she said to Timon, "so they can too." A brief silence. Timon did not deny it. Fear moved through her, slow and heavy. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew this was bigger than just some street fight." Seo-Jun's gaze shifted to her then, not dismissive, not apologetic, just steady. "You are not in danger," he said. "That's a lie," she replied immediately. Timon studied her with new interest. "She is aware," he observed. "Yes," Seo-Jun said quietly, "she is." The room felt smaller now, crowded by truths no one had spoken aloud yet. Timon reached into his jacket. Amara tensed. He withdrew a phone instead, placing it on the table. "Our perimeter is being tightened," he said. "I recommend relocation." "No," Seo-Jun replied. Both Timon and Amara looked at him. "I am not moving," Seo-Jun continued. "Not yet." Timon's jaw tightened slightly. "Hyung Nim." "You will secure the building," Seo-Jun said calmly. "No visible presence, no weapons drawn, no interaction with residents." Timon hesitated. Seo-Jun's eyes hardened. "You will protect this apartment," he finished, "and you will remain unseen." A beat of silence. Then Timon bowed again. "Yes." Amara watched him turn and disappear as quietly as he had entered. The door shut with a soft click. She exhaled slowly. "You didn't look surprised," she said. Seo-Jun's gaze held hers. "I was." And suddenly, the apartment didn't feel small anymore. It felt like the center of a war. Amara wasn't supposed to be home yet. Sal had sent her off early when the dinner rush died unexpectedly, pressing leftover bread into her hands and telling her to get some rest. The sky was already dark when she climbed the stairs to her apartment, exhaustion pulling at her shoulders. She paused outside the door. Voices. Low, controlled, not the quiet, careful tones Seo-Jun used with her. Sharper. She unlocked the door slowly. Timon stood near the window, phone in hand. Seo-Jun was upright on the couch, no longer the recovering patient but something else entirely, posture straight, voice steady, authority woven into every syllable. "The port contracts will hold," Seo-Jun was saying. "Choi is bluffing, he wants panic, do not give him panic." Amara stepped inside without thinking. Both men turned. The shift was immediate. Timon went still. Seo-Jun's expression altered, but only slightly, a fraction too late. The room felt different tonight, colder, larger, as if the walls had expanded to make space for the truth. On the television, muted but unmistakable, a news segment flickered. Korean corporate heir Kang Seo-Jun, shipping magnate, rumored syndicate successor, missing after alleged attack. A photo filled the screen. Sharp jaw, controlled gaze. The same man, standing in her living room. Her breath left her slowly. "You didn't tell me your last name," she said quietly. Seo-Jun didn't respond right away. Timon spoke first. "We should continue this elsewhere." "No," Amara said, eyes never leaving Seo-Jun. "I think we're going to continue it right here." Timon looked to Seo-Jun for instruction. "Give us a moment," Seo-Jun said calmly. Timon bowed once and exited without another word. The door shut. Silence. Amara turned toward the television, then back to him. "Kang Seo-Jun," she read softly from the screen. "Billionaire CEO, heir to GM Ryong Holdings." Her eyes sharpened. "Suspected syndicate leadership." He didn't deny it. "You told me your name was Jay." It is. She laughed once, short, disbelieving. You're not some guy caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Her voice trembled despite her effort to steady it. You own the city. Seo-Jun held her gaze evenly. Ownership is a matter of perspective. Don't, she snapped. Don't do that calm, philosophical thing. She gestured around the apartment, small and cluttered and painfully ordinary. You're out there negotiating ports and destabilizing contracts, and people are dying over your name. Her voice cracked slightly. And I've been feeding you instant noodles. A flicker crossed his expression, not anger, not mockery, something closer to regret. I did not intend to deceive you. You didn't intend, she repeated. You let me believe you were some mid-level criminal hiding from a fight. I let you believe what you were prepared to accept. Her chest tightened. That's not the same thing. She thought of the textbooks, the quiet conversations, the way he had watched her like she was something rare. Did you know, she asked softly, about me? Yes. The word hit harder than anything else. You knew I wasn't a doctor. I knew you had been one in training. That's not the same. No, he agreed. It is. The rain began again outside, softer this time. Amara shook her head slowly. You're a billionaire mafia boss. Yes. And you're hiding on my couch. Yes. She swallowed. And if your enemies find you here? He met her eyes without hesitation. They will find you too. For the first time since she dragged him out of that alley, real fear settled into her bones. Not of him, but of what his truth meant. The knock this time was deliberate. Not hurried, not forceful. Measured. Amara felt it in her spine before Seo-Jun even stood. He didn't look surprised. Stay here, he said quietly. That hasn't worked out well for me so far, she replied. The door opened before either of them could move further. Kang Seo-Jun entered as if the apartment belonged to him. He did not wear power loudly. It sat on him naturally, in the cut of his dark coat, in the stillness of his posture, in the way his gaze swept the room and dismissed it in a single glance. His eyes settled on Amara. Not curious. Assessing. You are the girl, he said. Not a question. Seo-Jun stepped forward slightly, positioning himself between them without making it obvious. Father. The word hung heavy in the small space. Amara's pulse thudded in her ears. Sung-min's gaze shifted briefly to his son's bandaged shoulder, then back to her. You hid him here, he said calmly, in this apartment. Amara straightened instinctively. He would have died. Sung-min's lips curved faintly, not approval, not amusement. A waitress performing surgery, he mused. How modern. Seo-Jun's jaw tightened. She saved my life. Yes, Sung-min replied, with knowledge she was never qualified to use. The words landed sharp. Amara felt the heat rise in her face. I did what needed to be done, she said evenly. Sung-min finally stepped closer, studying her the way one might examine a flawed gemstone. You are not licensed, he continued. You withdrew from university 6 months ago, outstanding debt, academic probation. Your mother's medical expenses nearly bankrupted your family. The room tilted. Seo-Jun looked at her. Not with anger, but with something else. Realization. You investigated her, Seo-Jun said, voice low. I investigate everyone who stands within reach of my son, Sung-min replied. Amara swallowed, humiliation blooming slowly under her skin. She is no doctor, Sung-min said, eyes still on Seo-Jun. She is a dropout, a failure with debt. The word failure echoed louder than the rest. Seo-Jun's gaze shifted back to Amara. And for one unbearable second, she saw it, the recalibration. The adjustment of expectation. He had respected her skill. Believed she was something hidden but accomplished. Now he knew she was unfinished. Incomplete. The silence was worse than any insult. I never said I was licensed, she said quietly. You implied competence, Sung-min replied. I demonstrated it, she shot back. Seo-Jun's eyes flickered, caught between them. Sung-min's expression did not change. You saved him, that is commendable, but you are not equal to him. Amara felt something inside her fracture. I never claimed to be. That is precisely the problem, Sung-min said. The rain outside intensified, tapping against the window like restless fingers. Seo-Jun finally spoke. That is enough. His voice was controlled, but steel threaded through it. Sung-min studied his son carefully. You are distracted, he said, and distraction is weakness. He turned toward the door, without another glance at Amara. Choose wisely, he said to Seo-Jun, before others choose for you. The door closed softly behind him. Silence settled. Amara kept her eyes on the floor. She didn't trust them, not a break if she looked up. You didn't tell me, Seo-Jun said quietly. She let out a slow breath. I didn't think I had to. For the first time since she dragged him from the alley, she felt smaller in her own apartment. Not because of his father, but because she had believed, foolishly, that skill had been enough. The first gunshot shattered the window before Amara understood what she was hearing. Glass exploded inward in a spray of rain and neon. The lamp crashed to the floor. The small apartment filled with the smell of gunpowder and wet concrete. Seo-Jun moved instantly, grabbing her and pulling her down behind the couch as another shot tore through the wall where she had been standing seconds before. They found us, she whispered. Yes, he said. His voice was steady, but his hand pressed briefly against his healing shoulder. Outside, tires screeched, doors slammed, more shots. Director Choi did not bluff. Taemin burst through the hallway like a shadow given form, weapon already drawn. Rear stairwell compromised, he said sharply. We move now. A bullet tore through the drywall near the kitchen. Amara's ears rang. Seo-Jun tried to rise too quickly. The stitches pulled. Blood bloomed faintly through the bandage. She saw it immediately. You're reopening the wound, she said. I can walk. You can bleed. Another blast splintered the doorframe. Taemin returned fire with cold precision, forcing the shooters to reposition. From outside, sirens wailed closer than before. Police. Dante. The timing could not have been worse. Police are inbound, Taemin warned. Seo-Jun looked toward the door, calculating. If the police found him here, wounded and armed, there would be no quiet escape. If Choi's men reached them first, there would be no survival. Another shot hit the couch, inches from Amara's hand. Instinct overrode fear. Bathroom, she ordered Seo-Jun. He hesitated. Now. Taemin shifted position to shield them as Amara half-dragged, half-supported Seo-Jun down the narrow hallway. More glass shattered. They made it into the bathroom, just as another round ripped through the living room. She pushed him onto the closed toilet lid and tore open the bandage. The wound had reopened along one edge. You're not dying in my apartment twice, she muttered. He almost smiled despite the chaos. Focused, he said. Shut up. She worked fast, hands steady despite the gunfire outside. Pressure, clean, restitch where necessary. The sirens were deafening now. A voice shouted through a megaphone. Police, drop your weapons. Dante. She could recognize that command anywhere. Taemin's return fire ceased. A heavy crash followed, the front door forced open. Footsteps thundered inside. Amara finished tying off the stitch just as boots stopped outside the bathroom. Amara, Dante's voice cut through everything. Are you in there? Seo-Jun's eyes met hers. 1,000 unspoken calculations passed between them. She stood and opened the door. Dante filled the hallway, weapon raised, uniform soaked from rain. His gaze flicked past her immediately to Seo-Jun sitting upright, bandaged alive. Recognition dawned slowly. You, Dante said quietly. Seo-Jun did not move. Amara stepped between them instinctively. He would have bled out, she said, twice. Dante's jaw tightened. Behind him, officers secured the living room. Director Choi's men are down, he said. You're in the middle of a war, Amara. I know. His eyes dropped briefly to the fresh bandage at Seo-Jun's shoulder. You treated him again. Yes. Dante lowered his weapon slowly. Outside, Teeman stood surrounded but compliant. The apartment was wrecked, shattered glass, bullet holes, smoke. And in the middle of it, Seo-Jun was still alive. Because of her. Dante looked at her one long moment. Then he exhaled. Get him out of here, he said quietly, before I change my mind. For the second time in a week, Amara had chosen. And this time, everyone had seen it. By morning, the apartment no longer looked like a home. Glass glittered across the floor like frost. The couch was torn open along one arm. The wall behind the kitchen bore a dark constellation of bullet holes. Director Choi was dead. The news called it an organized crime dispute resolved overnight. They never mentioned the waitress who had stitched the heir back together twice. They never mentioned the cop who chose not to make an arrest. Dante stood in the hallway as paramedics cleared the last of the injured officers. He didn't look at Seo-Jun when he spoke. You disappear, he said quietly, and she stays out of your war. Seo-Jun met his gaze evenly. She was never part of it. Dante's jaw flexed. Make sure she never is. It wasn't permission. It was mercy. Seo-Jun turned to Amara then. No guards, no father, no war in his eyes this time. Just something steady. You should not have had to stand in the middle of that, he said. I didn't stand, she replied softly. I worked. A faint curve touched his mouth. You did. There were 1,000 things neither of them said. No dramatic promises, no declarations. Just a quiet understanding that something had shifted. Teeman approached from the stairwell, expression unreadable. The car is ready. Seo-Jun looked at Amara one last time. You were never a failure, he said. Then he left. No kiss. No backward glance. Just absence. The apartment felt impossibly small after that. A week later, Sal's diner looked exactly the same. The neon hummed, the coffee burned, the world continued. Amara carried plates to table 6, nodded at regulars, smiled when required. Her sneakers were clean now. No stains, no evidence. Dante hadn't come back. The city had gone quiet again, the way it always did after violence, pretending it had never happened. The bell above the door chimed. She didn't look up at first. Coffee, a calm voice said. She did then. Lee Teeman stood near the counter, immaculate as always, presence composed enough to still the air around him. He placed a thick cream envelope on the counter. For you, he said simply. Her hands hesitated before picking it up. It was heavy. Too heavy for paper alone. Teeman's gaze held hers for a brief moment, not threatening, not friendly, respectful. He asked me to ensure it reached you personally, he said. Where is he? She asked quietly. Safe. Teeman inclined his head once, then turned and walked out as silently as he had arrived. The bell chimed again. The diner returned to its ordinary rhythm. Amara stood very still. She opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a cashier's check, an amount large enough to cover every remaining cent of her medical school tuition. Underneath it, a single card. She unfolded it. To the best doctor I know. No signature. She swallowed hard. The noise of the diner faded into the background as something steadier took its place inside her chest. Not rescue. Not charity. Recognition. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine walking back into a lecture hall, wearing scrubs again, not hiding. Outside, the rain began again, softer this time. And for once, it didn't feel like something being washed away. It felt like something beginning.